All right, hello everybody. My name is Jim Pingle and welcome to our October 2015 Hangout. This month I'm going to be continuing last month's remote access VPNs discussion. We ran way over last month and there were still some things we didn't get to cover. I know I had a couple of comments from users that were really missing some info on Macs, so that's what I decided to focus more on this time. First up, just a little bit of overview of what we're going to be talking about. I've got some project news to go over. I'm probably going to have some time for Q&A at the end, so be thinking of anything you want to ask about remote access VPNs or anything, I guess generally related to that, but trying to focus on remote access VPNs. We're going to review just a little bit about just the general overview of VPN type things that we talked about last week. I'm going to go over IPv2 EAP-RADIUS a little bit, since I didn't touch on that last month at all, and that's a very important one. I'm going to go over what fixes and changes we put in for mobile IPsec on 2.2.5 and 2.3. I'm going to go through OpenVPN again. I'm just going to quickly review the settings we used last month for OpenVPN on the server. And then I'm going to go over how to install OpenVPN on Mac OS X using both Viscosity and Tunnelblick, and then we'll go on iOS with the OpenVPN Connect app. Then I'll go over IPsec VPN again. I'm going to use EAP-RADIUS this time, and there are a few changes that need to be made to accommodate the default config on the Macs. So there will be some changes there, which is why I need to review that a little bit more in detail. And then I'll show you how to configure an IPv2 profile on Mac OS X and 10.11 and iOS 9. There are other ways to configure the VPNs like that, which I'll get into, but I'm just going to start with a basic manual configuration. There are some fancier things that'll be possible with VPN configuration profiles and such once we get the factory image of 2.2.5 out. All right, first up, I got some project notes. The 2.2.5 release will be out shortly. We were hoping to get it out today or tomorrow, but we got delayed a little bit. There was a memory leak that's been plaguing us in StrongSwan, and we finally figured out what it was and how to fix it, but the fix broke our status processing, so we had to rewrite the status processing code. So that set us back a little bit. But once we get that sorted out, which hopefully we'll have that figured out by the end of the weekend, we'll have it out. Either that or sometime very early next week. Our 2.3 release is progressing still. Last month we didn't have snapshots out. Now we've got snapshots out. You can load that up. Just go to snapshots.pfSense.org. At this point, a clean, fresh install is probably better than an upgrade, but upgrades should be okay, especially with a full install. NanoBSD upgrades are still a work in progress. Mostly, the changes were in the Bootstrap GUI. There were quite a bit of changes in the back end, but the most visible things are in the Bootstrap GUI. And there are, most of the things we've ever been able to find have been fixed now, but if you download it, load it up, give it a try. If anything in the GUI doesn't work like you expect, just pass it along, let us know. The new package system is working really well. We've got a search capability that really will speed up, trying to locate and install packages. And in general, the new package-based system for installing and managing packages is working really well. As we discussed a little bit last month, that's been completely rewritten. The PBI stuff is gone. Everything is using package-ng. And our old XML RPC style of pulling package info in the GUI, that's all gone. It's all using the FreeBSD tool for package-ng. It's really, really nice. In terms of the devices we sell, are the 2220 and 2440 units had been out of stock. They're back in stock now. We're not sure how long they'll last. We're still waiting on some 4860 desktop units that recently sold out. And we do have some 4861 in stock, and all the 8860s are sold out right now, but we're waiting on more. They should be in, I don't have a date, but we're expecting them before too long. Okay, so on to a little bit of our review. So basically, the main question was, why would you want to use a VPN? And it's because, you need security, and also authentication for reaching resources behind your firewall on your LAN or other internal networks. If you open up things to the outside world with a port forward, or just open things up, on a public address or routed address, open it up wide to the internet, it's a big security concern, especially with embedded devices or things that have very badly coded TCP/IP stacks or user authentication. The biggest offenders are things like DVRs, IP cameras, things of that nature. You really don't want to expose those to the public. So if you add a VPN on there, not only does it encrypt your access to it, but it also offers that layer of authentication where the people reaching it are the intended recipients. It's not something that just anybody can brute force their way into. In terms of the types of Road Warrior VPNs or mobile VPNs on pfSense, the ones we prefer are OpenVPN, especially using SSL, TLS, and user authentication. That way you've got username and password authentication with per user certificates if possible. Not always feasible to have that much security on there. Some people compromise and just use either user auth or just SSL, TLS. The more the better in terms of security, but obviously there's always the classic trade-off. For IPsec, our current recommendation for mobile is IKV2. We don't recommend using plain PSK or even in some cases the old XAuth style, because the XAuth style works, but the parameters you need to accommodate different platforms don't always get along with each other. So it can be tough to craft one that works for all platforms. Plus the XAuth style at the moment, at least with pre-shared key, doesn't work on Android. But with RSA certificates, it would work, but it's a little bit more overhead to get stuff to the clients. So, but IKV2 is very simple, which I'll show you, at least on a Mac even, it's even simpler than other platforms. Another one to avoid, you never want to use PPTP, don't use it. We've ripped it out of 2.3, nobody should be using it. It's been completely broken. The protocol itself has, and it's just junk, and the world is better off without it. L2TP IPsec has some issues on certain platforms, and you're better off just using IKV2. And as I said, plain IPsec with only PSK. You could use it, but the support on various platforms is pretty low, especially on modern ones. About the only one you really might want to use that for is if you have to accommodate Windows XP, but even then you could use XAuth with the ShrewSoft client or something. A couple of quick concepts here. Something you'll need to know that we're going to cover it last month, but we're going to continue it this month, is talking about certificate structure. Because OpenVPN and IKV2, they both need a certificate structure. You need to have a certificate authority, and you need to have a server certificate made just right using the correct parameters for the server to function. OpenVPN is a little bit more lenient with the server certificate requirements. IKV2, the clients are varied a bit, but they're more strict. I'll go over what you need to do for that again here momentarily. You manage these certificates on the firewall under System Insert Manager. It's generally best to use a different CA or certificate set for each VPN with different security requirements. So, if you've got vendors and technical support having to get into your network, you generally wouldn't want to give them the same access. And if you use the same certificate authority, there's a chance that one could hop to the other if just the right other sets of parameters are right. And your subnets for your VPNs, you need to have a unique unused local subnet, to use for the mobile clients that they'll get an address assigned out of. For user authentication, for OpenVPN, you can do just about anything. There are, you can do local users that are on the firewall. You can do Radius, you can do LDAP, or you can do certificate only without any authentication. IPsec, it varies by mode what you can do. With XAuth, you can use local users, Radius, or LDAP. EPMS chat v2, you have to manually enter the users on the pre-shared key tab under VPN IPsec. EAP-RADIUS can pull Radius from users authentication from Radius, which is pretty flexible. But at the moment for IKV2, we don't have any option for LDAP. Although you can have free radius call back to LDAP, and EAP-RADIUS may be able to hit free radius, and which can in turn get to LDAP. I haven't tested that, but in theory it should work. You may remember this chart from last month, just showing you which clients are available on which platforms. Had a couple of updates and things to emphasize. I had marked the Windows Vista 7, 8, here I'd marked it as 8.1 plus for these, but really it does work on Windows 7. It just requires a different certificate procedure to install the certificate on the client. It is much more of a pain than on 8.1 or above. But we do have that on the wiki. So if you load up the EAP-MS Chat v2 procedure on the wiki, there's a link there to how you install the certificates on Windows 7. It's kind of a pain. So I mean, it can be done if you were wondering. So it's a little bit more compatible than we thought. I also added to the column here, anything that works with EAP-MS Chat v2 will also work with EAP-RADIUS from what I found. So, and the focus of this month here, we're going to do, I've got iOS 9, which can handle just about anything, and OS X 10.11, El Capitan, it can handle just about anything. So very flexible platforms. Okay, some things changes we made for 2.2.5 and 2.3 and for IPsec, specifically for mobile IPsec. For EAP-RADIUS, you can assign IP addresses to users from Radius. For IKV2, we added IPv6 options to the mobile tab. There was some quirk with iOS 9 that required that, but we handled that all in the background. You don't actually have to manually specify it yourself. IPsec in general with IKV2 can mix IPv4 and IPv6. Not specific to mobile VPNs, that's even for site to sites. If you were wanting to carry IPv6 over an IPv4 tunnel, you can do that with IKV2 now. With IKV1, if your tunnel was established over v4, the only traffic it could carry was v4. So now if you have IPv6 on 2 remote LANs and you just want to have one tunnel carried over v4, you can do that now. OpenVPN could always do that, but IPsec only recently gained that with IKV2. IKV1, there were some fixes for hybrid RSA authentication. Not sure how many people were using that in practice, but there were some parts of it were broken, especially with Apple clients. We've got all that fixed up. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, we found and fixed that strong swan memory leak, but we're having to rewrite the status code because of it. Fixed some fixes for pre-shared key mismatches on iOS, the Cisco IPsec client, like the kind you use for XAuth. So there were some issues with identifiers and things like that we've got straightened out. Fixes for certificate handling and writing for Strong Swan. Our backend was being a little bit too lenient with what certificates and certificate authorities it wrote out. We've refined that a bit, so it's only going to write what it really needs now. We also have some fixes for certificate handling with IKV2 with iOS 9 and OS 10. For manual configurations, because they require the server to always send its certificate. Others, will request it or send it, send a request and it'll pass it back and forth. But we found that for those platforms, for at least for manual configuration, it works better if we always send it, and it works for other platforms too. So we didn't dig too deep into that. You can work around that with a VPN profile on Apple as well. It's just a little bit extra work on the client side. And we had some logging fixes. There were some times when the log messages were getting duplicated in Strong Swan, and there were some other configurations because you couldn't actually turn off all the logs. So we had some fixes for log handling as well. Okay, talk about IKV2 EAP-RADIUS, which I completely left out last month. It's in 2.2.4, but it's not optimal. We had some improvements for it on 2.2.5. So you can try it out if you want to, but so given how close 2.2.5 is, if you haven't set it up yet, I'd wait for 2.2.5 and switch over to it then. So you can authenticate against a single Radius server. So on the mobile clients tab, you select a Radius server there. Then on your phase 1, you just have to pick EAP-RADIUS. IP addresses can be assigned from Radius on 2.2.5, but it's all or nothing. So you have to assign every user manually, like give them all a manual IP address in your subnet. Or if you don't do it that way, it's all automatic. And the way you kick that in is just if you have Radius selected, but you don't define a tunnel network, so it'll try to pull it from Radius. And then the old behavior, if you don't have anything specified in Radius and the field is blank, it should let the client leave it up to the client. So in terms of setting it up, the setup is identical to EAP-MS Chat v2. The only difference is you select the radius server and you turn on EAP-RADIUS. So obviously you have to define that radius server under the user manager, and then you just have to select it on the mobile clients tab, which I'll go over at least the selection portion of that here in a moment. Shifting gears, going over to OpenVPN first. The full details of the setup obviously are on the wiki and in the book. First things first, you go under System Insert Manager, and you set up you create a new certificate authority. I just called mine OpenVPN CAA. And the details of the certificate don't really matter. They're just whatever you want to put in for your organization. It's all self-signed, so it doesn't have to be too accurate. Certificates, you have to make a server certificate here as well. When you make it, you have to make sure that you have this certificate type set to server certificate. Otherwise, it's not going to work right. For the common name with OpenVPN, it doesn't matter so much, but you could put in the host name of the firewall if you want. And once you've got your server created, you can also make user certificates depending on the mode you choose. I'm doing external authentication on this one with a radius server, so I had made the certificates for the users there just under the certificates tab of the certificate manager. Just a quick look at the server we've got. The server mode, I've got this in SSL TLS with user authentication, and I have my radius server selected. Just protocol, UDP, port 1194, all standard default stuff. I do have TLS authentication enabled. That's optional, but you really want to do that. There's not really a good reason not to. Now, the export package can handle all the hard stuff of getting that onto the client. I've got my peer certificate authority selected. I've got a certificate revocation list I made. This is also optional. You don't really need a certificate revocation list until it comes time when you actually have a user you want to revoke a certificate for. And I've got a server certificate here. And DH parameters, 1024, encryption, AS256, SHA-1, all fairly standard stuff here. I did turn on strict user CN matching on this example so that the username that they give for user authentication has to match the common name of the certificate. So if Alice tries to log in with Sue's credentials with her own certificate, it won't work. IPv4 tunnel network is just a local unused network, 10.3.201 here. My local network, I just put a /16 for everything that's actually on this site. I could have a comma separated list here like 10.3.00/24, comma 10.3.01 or 10.3.10/24, comma, so on and so forth. Let's see, I've got compression enabled with adaptive compression because that's a pretty good compromise. If it will periodically do a test, and if the data can be compressed, it will turn compression on. If it can, it will turn compression off. So it's a good compromise. And most of this other stuff is all defaults here too. I do have dynamic IP and address pool checked so they get an IP address out of the tunnel network. And I've got some DNS options set up. That's really all there was to the server. Over here on the client export tab is where the magic is going to happen. I have just this one server, so there's only one remote access server, so there's only this one choice. And down here you'll see these are the users that I have certificates for, and it shows certificate with external authentication. The ones we're going to be worried about today are this OpenVPN Connect iOS/Android. That's going to be the one we want to export for our iOS client. And the others type here is useful for either Tunnelblick or Viscosity. You can also use the Viscosity bundle down here, which is a little bit more formal for getting it into Viscosity. Although nowadays it will read either one. It used to be we only had the Viscosity bundle and this the inline option didn't exist. But over the years they've come to process these just about as well as they do these. So. All right, so I have those already exported on my client, and you just want to click on those and save them somewhere and get them somewhere where they're accessible just like drop them. At least with Mac OS 10, they can be local on there. They can be on iCloud or Dropbox or whatever. When it comes to iOS, for whatever reason, it won't read those configuration files from Dropbox or iCloud or anything like that. The only way I found to do it is through iTunes or email, and I'll show you that here in a moment. But I'll do OS 10 first. So yeah, we export the Viscosity bundle or the inline others config for Viscosity. Viscosity is $9 a seat, but it is probably the most clean and useful VPN client that's out there right now. And actually, it's not only Mac, it actually works on Windows too. And the Windows client does not require admin privilege escalation, the way it sets everything up. So if you're looking for a Windows, if you want to use OpenVPN on Windows, but you don't want to have your users deal with running it as administrator, that's another excellent option there too. I know the cost can add up a little bit over, depending on how many users you have, but it works beautifully, and for a lot of people, it's really worth it. So like over here on the Mac, you can see I've got iCloud. I've just got my VPN profiles in here. I already expanded the Viscosity zip file you get from the export package, and Viscosity Visc is right here. Once you've got Viscosity installed, all you do is double click that, and it'll open it up and import it. Let's see, connection, Viscosity imported the connection. And when you run it, it's just up here in the notification bar. If you go to preferences, you can get a little bit more options here. See, there's all the different times I imported it, and there's where I imported the other inline configurations as well. Unlike some clients, the Viscosity client lets you edit the parameters a bit. You can actually adjust. It will have here selected everything that was in your configuration by default, but it does let you change some things on the fly. Unlike like the Windows client and Tunnelblick and some others, they don't really give you much in the way of adjustability. Like the OpenVPN Connect app doesn't give you anything. The Android OpenVPN client that we like, it will let you adjust things like this as well, but they're about the only two out there that do. So really, really nice, really slick. Now, once it's imported, all you really have to do is, you can connect and disconnect. Usually do that up here from the notification menu bar. If you click connect, it's going to prompt me for my user credentials here in a moment. And now it's connected. And now I can come over here and I can ping inside the VPN. And that's really it. Once I got that, I can click on it. I click on details, and you'll get, it's got some like your connected time and traffic graph. Over here, it's in the middle, it's got some network statistics, and there is your log. If you've got connection problems, you can look at it there. Oh, and then once you're through that, once you want to disconnect, you just click on disconnect, and off it goes. Then you can quit out of it if you're not using it. So, I mean, really, that's it. Easy peasy. Tunnelblick, a little bit different. Tunnelblick is an open source free client you can get for OS 10. And it deals, okay, with the others type inline VPN, although importing into Tunnelblick is really awkward. Once you have it downloaded and installed, it'll ask you if you have configuration files, you can say yes, but you want to make sure that you're quit completely out of Tunnelblick before you try to import. Like when you run Tunnelblick, it's got an icon way over here in the notification bar. If you go to VPN details, if you try to import from here, it's going to give you a whole song and dance about what you need to do, because you have to quit completely out of Tunnelblick. And when you quit completely out of Tunnelblick, which you have to go up here, quit, and then find your config in Finder. I know some people don't have two mouse buttons, but if you right click it, you can do open with Tunnelblick, or you can just double click it, and it will import it from there. Once it's imported, it's available right away. You can just click connect, and you can optionally save your credentials if you want in your keychain. And it gives you a status readout of what it's doing when it's connecting, getting a configuration and whatnot. Now it's connected, and I can ping through the VPN again. Now when you look at the VPN details, about all you can do is set a couple of things about like your DNS and some of the behaviors about how it goes through the connection. There's not, you know, it's log. It's pretty simplistic. Not a lot you can really adjust. Most of the stuff, even in advanced, is just more about how the client software behaves, and not necessarily about how the VPN parameters are going to be processed. So if you're just looking for a no frills free client, Tunnelblick can get the job done. But if you need something fancier, definitely move on and get the other one. Let's see. All right. And let's see. Let's try iOS here. Give me a second to fire up the screen. And of course it worked earlier, but now it's not working. Every time I went to run this earlier, it worked just fine, but now it is not. Let me launch that again. That kicked it in. And this little utility I'm using is called Lonely Screen. It turns for Mac and PC. It turns it's a free little bit of software that turns it into an AirPlay receiver, and then on the iOS device you can connect it up to it pretty easily. Cast the screen. You can't do remote control, but you can still see what's going on. So in this case, just to show you how it imports. I don't like emailing configurations because it's not secure, but I mean, if you have your mail client, if you have your mail app connecting with an encrypted protocol over to your mail server, you know, it's not the end of the world, but it's not ideal. But if we go in here, if you attach an OpenVPN configuration and you open it up here, it gives you the option to open it with OpenVPN, where it shows copy to OpenVPN here. You tap that, the OpenVPN Connect app will come up and offer to import it. I've already got this one imported, so the behavior is slightly different. When you go into the OpenVPN app, it will show up here and offer to import it. You want to make sure you hit the green plus button to actually pull it in. Then you can put your credentials in, and then all you have to do is swipe it over, and if it all worked, that's very simple, very easy. It's on already. Sort of like with Tunnelblick, there's really not a lot you can do. You can view the profile, you can rename it, you can add in credentials, and that's it. You can't even look at the various connection parameters. That's very, very no frills, but it will connect and get the job done. So if you have a case where you might need to adjust things, you might find that you have to import several slightly different client files to an iOS device if you want to give them any choice as to how it behaves. And although it does show up, like if you go under General and VPN, the VPN does show up in the list here, and it will check it, but it doesn't let you really do much with it. It says right there to connect, use the use the application. So even though it shows there, I guess it's not 100% integrated. So always go into the app to fire that off. And that's it for OpenVPN, really. I mean, that's pretty simple in all cases, made simple by our by the client export package. All right, next up, we're going to look at IPsec with IPv2. Just like before, the full details are on the wiki. Most of the details are here in the EAP-MS chat v2 doc that I've linked. There is a separate document for EAP-RADIUS, so the bulk of it just says, hey, go over there and look at the EAP-MS chat v2 and then make these little adjustments. I'm going to go over the OS 10 and iOS 9 configurations for this. All very easy. Just so you know, it's not in the snapshots yet. It won't be actually in snapshots per se. It will be in if you have an SG series device or a device you bought from us, when you do a firmware upgrade to the factory image of 225, we will have a profile exporter for IPsec in there, sort of like our OpenVPN one, but it exports the VPN profiles that you can use to pre-configure iOS and OS 10 for VPNs, for IPsec, which is nice. You can use a lot more varied parameters. The parameters I'm going to cover here, they will cover a manual configuration of IPv2 on OS 10 or iOS. So just be wary of that when you go to make it. Other things are possible. It's just that these are the defaults that just work with the manual configuration. Now to make this work right, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, you've got to be running 225, which should be out in a couple of days, or you can run a snapshot if you want. So similar to OpenVPN, you need to make a certificate authority, and you need to make a server certificate made in a really special way. It's a little bit more involved than making the OpenVPN one. Just to show you what it would look like, you need to make sure that you've chosen the right certificate authority. It needs to be a server certificate. The common name has to be the server's name as it exists in DNS. So this is the host name of this firewall. That's the same host name that's in DNS. And you have to put that in the common name, and you have to add it again as an subject alternate name, like that. And then you also have to add the WAN address of the firewall, which let me double check what that is. You have to add the WAN address as another subject alternate name, 198.51. So for this particular setup, it looks like this. I've got the common name as the host name, the DNS type SAN for the host name again, and then IP address, and I've got the WAN address in there. So you need to have all of that looking just like that. If you don't, then the various clients will reject it in various different ways. Windows checks the common name, but not the alternate names. Linux checks the alternate names, but not the common name. And I believe Apple checks both, and it has to be in both, but I don't know, it's not worth the hassle of trying to pare this down. If you do it this way, it's known to work across every platform we've got. This particular configuration I'm going to show you, it does work with iOS, OS 10, as well as Windows, Android, and Linux. So all of them using the IPv2 can connect. It's native on everything except Android. In that case, you just load the Strong Swan app, and it's just fine. So that's how you make your server certificate. Over here on VPN IPsec, under mobile clients, I've got this enabled. Because I'm using EAP-RADIUS, I've got a radius server selected. Virtual address pool, I have that enabled because I'm just going to have Strong Swan assign the firewall, assign them the IP address out of this pool. I have network list unchecked because that's going to have them nudge it to pass all traffic over the tunnel instead of a specific list. I do have DNS settings enabled. Those are optional, but because I'm tunneling everything through, it's good to at least have a DNS server set. The rest of that is off. Over here on my tunnels, for phase 1, it's IKE v2. So key exchange version is set for v2. Internet protocol IPv4, interface WAN. Authentication method, I've chosen EAP-RADIUS. My identifier is distinguished name, and it's again the host name of the firewall right here, and that also, again matches the server certificate CN and this, the DNS type SAN. Peer identifier set to any. I've got my certificate set to the certificate that was made the way I showed you. Encryption algorithm, I have it set for 3DES. That's because that's a little bit weaker than the others, but it's what OS 10 and iOS want by default. Hash algorithm, same here, SHA-1, they want that by default. DH group 2, lifetime 28,800. I also have Mobike enabled so that they can roam, and dead peer detection is on. Now for phase 2, a little bit more flexibility here. I do have it set for network, and I've just got my LAN set here. Description, that's a little, it should say, LAN network there. I changed it from last month, but didn't change this description. For encryption, I've got AES set to auto, so we'll accept anything the client wants AES. Also, I have 3DES set. Again, 3DES is what iOS and OS 10 want. Hash algorithms, I got SHA-1 and SHA-256 set, so either of those will work. For mobile, when you're acting as a responder, it doesn't hurt to have more of these set. Where this would hurt you to have more set is when you are doing a site-to-site tunnel and you're establishing. In that case, it can take longer to lock into something. But in this case, it's okay to have them all on. And I've got pfSense disabled. So the key important takeaways here are you need to have 3DES and SHA-1 on all sides. And of course, when you're doing this, obviously, I didn't mention it for OpenVPN, but OpenVPN needs a WAN rule. OpenVPN, you have to have a rule here to pass traffic. IPsec, you have to have a rule to pass traffic. I went over the details of setting all that up last month, and it's also in the wiki, in the book, and everywhere else. So, got to make sure you have all that. For iOS and OS 10 and others, when you're doing an EAP-RADIUS or EAP-MS Chat v2 style configuration, you do need to get the IPsec certificate authority installed onto clients. So you want to use this first button here and export only the CA certificate. You do not want to put the key on there, just the certificate. That's all you want. And you get that saved, and like I said, I copied it onto iCloud, but similar to the OpenVPN configuration, iOS won't read it from iCloud. You have to email it to you, but since it's just a CA certificate, that's not that big of a deal. There are probably other ways to drag it on there, but it depends on what you're up to. So when you import this into iOS, you got your IPsec CA cert. You have to double click the certificate, which will pull up your keychain, allow you to modify the keychain. When you first pull this in, it may prompt you where to put it. You want to put it under system, or it may go, in some cases it might find it under login. In login, you want to drag it, so move it under system. You may have to go through some auth prompts to make that happen. See, I've got it here. Once you have it here, if you go get info from it, when you first copy this certificate in, here in the trust section, it'll say when using this certificate, it'll say, it won't say always trust here, it'll say never trust or use default or something like that. You want to make sure you set that to always trust, and you'll get another auth prompt for that. So you need to make sure that is set to always trust, otherwise it's not gonna work right. All right, so now once it's trusted, just need to go here into, well, let's quit out of keychain access. Go into system preferences. Then we go into network. Oh, and that was connected the whole time. And you can add a new entry by clicking this plus down here. You pick VPN. The default type is IPv2. And you just put in your service name, like example code, click create. It'll have a new entry. You just fill in the server address as the host name and DNS again. Remote ID, same thing as server address, the server name and DNS. Authentication settings, it defaults to username, which is good, so you just pop in your username and password if you want it to be saved. And that's it. Like up here, I've already got it set. You just got that, and that, authentication settings, I've got that set. Advanced parameters, you don't need to worry about, it's just DNS, and it should pull that, or if you have any trouble with it, you can always put it in manual. I've got it checked to show the VPN status in the menu bar. That's optional, but it's a little bit easier to manage it. You can click connect here to connect, or you can come up here into the menu bar and click connect here. One thing that's a little quirky, when you click connect here, it still says connecting up here, even when it's connected. It shows, it'll show connected if you click away and go back to it. There's a little bit of a slight bug in OS 10.11, but it does work. And again, passing traffic over the VPN just fine. So really, it's all here in the slides, but I just showed it to you. It's all, you just got to make sure you fill in, go in, you make the entry, fill in the host name or server address, and remote ID is the host name and DNS. Fill in the auth settings, that's it. Let me fire back up. Screen mirroring. And we will get back to setting up iOS 9 here. There we go. Now to import the certificate, just like OpenVPN, I emailed it to myself. As you'll see here in email, it has the certificate. You just tap it, it'll come up and show a profile. Mine shows a green verified because it's already imported. It will just show up as red, and it won't be in there by default. You just tap install up in the upper right, tap install again, and that's it. Now it's imported. You can tap done on there and it'll be done. Now to set up the actual VPN connection, we just go here to settings. Go back to settings here. And we've got, let's see, just go down here to scroll down to VPN and add VPN configuration. The description, it's free form, whatever you want. Server name, just like on OS 10, just the firewall's host name and DNS. Remote ID, same thing, firewall's host name and DNS. Local ID, you leave blank. Authentication, just make sure it's on username, and you can fill in your credentials if you want, or you can leave it. You have to put in the username, but it'll prompt you for the password. So you can just put in your username. I'll show you here the one I've already got configured. Description, example code VPN, server and remote ID, same thing. and username and password. That's it. You do have to make sure if you have multiple VPN entries, when you come in here under your VPN preferences, you have to tap on the one you want, so it's got a check mark. That's the active connection. And then up under status not connected, you just swipe that. It was connecting, then connected. That's it. VPN's on. And that is it. That's all you have to do to get your VPNs going on a Mac. Or and on iOS. So I guess I can open up for questions now to see if anybody's got any questions. That's really all I wanted. Really all I had to get to today, which nice to wrap it up a little earlier than usual, especially after that last one ran way over. So if anybody has any questions, you can go ahead and type them in the chat. And you can, if you're going to have a question, it might take a while to type, just go ahead and type something short, just so I know to wait on you. The notes, the slides and the videos are posted on the portal. So if you just go to portal.pfSense.org/members and log in there with your gold subscription username and password, you can view the slides and the videos for all of the past Hangout topics. The version of Tunnelblick with LCAP, I just used the whatever was the latest release. I didn't use the beta, I just used the regular one. Let's see, are there any plans to expand the phase 1 configuration to support multiple protocols? Yes, eventually. It's just not there now. I know StrongSwan supports it, but it's just not something we've had time to circle back and add into the GUI. But yeah, it would be nice to be able to support all of those like that. That way, the clients that support the higher end stuff can actually use what they want rather than all having to be shoehorned. But they do all support the they all do support 3DES and SHA-1. It's not ideal, but they do. So. Actually, Mark, I can show you here. Okay. Hold on just a second. There we go. Just gonna go over here and see what version of Tunnelblick that was, just so I can fully answer that question. I've got 354. And another thing with Tunnelblick, apparently it's really picky about having multiple versions installed. So they do have an uninstall procedure that you might need to follow to make sure your older versions are cleared off before you install a new one. All right, anybody else have any more questions? Oh, let's see, does the EAP-RADIUS configuration work with Windows Radius Server? I don't know. I have not used it against one personally. I don't see why it wouldn't unless they have some problem answering EAP formatted requests. But that's something you'd have to check with the NPS configuration. Like I said, I haven't tried it against that. I haven't seen anybody that's tried it yet. But if it was going to have a problem, it would probably be something that you could rectify by adjusting the network policy server configuration. What additional features are on our firewalls versus more generic pfSense boxes? Mostly they are tuned for the hardware that we sell. They have the expected interface configurations and everything already set up. They have some parameters tuned for optimal network processing. There is also a couple of extra features in the GUI. There is an AWS VPN wizard for connecting to Amazon VPC tunnels. There is, in 2.2.5, there's going to be that IPsec VPN profile exporter. A couple of little niceties here and there, but I mean, it's not major, but it's things that are nice to have for things that we put in extra for the customers who buy them from us. Alrighty. Well, are there any more questions? If not, we'll go ahead and wrap it up, and we'll have a happy Halloween, and hopefully it will also result in a 2.2.5 release as a treat instead of a trick. All right, we'll see you next month.